When The Crow came out in 1994, I was in elementary school. This was the rated R film that only the cool kids with the cool dad got to see. I did not have a cool dad. It would be several years before I got to see the film on cable TV. Thank you, TNT. I was in high school before I found out it was based on a graphic novel. I was in college before I finally got to read the source material. When I finally read the source material, I was surprised at how closely it was to the movie. 1994 was not a time when movie studios felt the need to stick closely to the comics. Studios felt the need to make major changes when adapting comics. Even The Crow, they felt the need to add a final boss, as it were. The fight on the church was cool. However, in the comics, the Crow just hunts down the members of the original gang. I don't think the story really needs a final boss, but the final boss helps round out the third act that most films need. In 1996, we would get the iconic sequel, Crow City of Angels. Now, when I was in college, I was dating this very lovely woman, and in her CD collection was a burned CD simply titled City of Angels. I went on and on about how much I loved that movie, the cinematography, the lighting, the action. I asked her if I could borrow the CD. She lent it to me. Well, it turns out there's another movie starring Nick Cage and Meg Ryan called City of Angels. To this day in my music library, I have the soundtrack to a film I've never seen. And out of sheer embarrassment, I never told her. There's an ex-girlfriend of mine out there to this day probably thinks I'm the biggest Nick Cage and Meg Ryan fan. The Crow's Salvation came out in 2000. I only recently watched this film for the first time. I felt if I was going to do a few sketches honoring this film, I figured I should watch it. I actually really liked it. The idea that the gang this time around was a gang of corrupt cops, I thought was a really good twist on The Crow. The face markings being from the electric chair didn't really work for me, but they were trying something new. My biggest problem with this film is the big bad final boss is a corrupt military general. And at one point he says something to the effect of, "Sometimes the dead come back. I've studied this phenomenon." What I have a hard time believing is a general would be reading occult studies and believing them. This line just rubs me the wrong way. We never get any backstory as to why he's studying this phenomenon. If this phenomenon are the other crows that we've seen in previous films. It establishes kind of a bigger world, but doesn't give us anything to go back on. It just leaves it hanging. And also when he is finally killed, he makes a statement believing that this is wrong and he too will come back. I don't think that's how this works, buddy. And if you had studied the phenomenon of the crow as we, the viewer, know it, you would know that too. The whole thing with the final boss always kind of rubs me the wrong way with these Crow films. But this one in particular, because that line, it just doesn't work for me. The Crow 4 Wicked Prayer. I remember when the DVD came out. My friend was a big Buffy fan, so a Crow film where David Boreanaz was the bad guy was a must-own. Was the movie good? No. But it uses one of my favorite lines from the original comic book. "I know why Jesus wept, motherfucker." The idea of the bad guy being a creepy cult could have been really cool. They should have leaned more into the Charles Manson vibe. Also, the whole thing takes place on an Indian reservation while the Crow is being played by Edward Furlong. one of the whitest white guys who ever white guyed. While I love Edward Furlong, I feel he was miscast for this project. However, if you've ever seen the first 3 Crows films, you have to see the 4th. It's the law. Nothing I can do about it. You have to see this. Sure, there's other things you could be doing right now with your life other than watching The Crow 4 Wicked Prayer. Yeah, the dishes need doing, sure. You should be folding laundry. But no, my friend, you need to finish the series. Speaking of the series, there was also a TV show. The series called Crow Stairway to Heaven. That's what we call a segue in the business. Nailed it. I saw bits and pieces of the TV series growing up, but it was on in the middle of the day like VIP or Jack of all trades, so I never really got to watch it unless I was homesick from school. I have seen a total of 2 episodes, so I'm not the best person here to talk about the TV series. The only thing that bothers me about the TV series is everything seems to be taking place during the day. Take the same scenes with the same TV dialogue, but just set it at night in the shadows, and at least you get some mood. The TV show felt like a poor imitation of the first film. I rather watch number 4 than the TV show. But that's just me. Let me know in the comments if you liked the TV show. In closing, I hope we get another Crow movie. I've read a few of the comics, and as always, it's right there on the page for Hollywood to ignore. If anyone wants to pay me to write a Crow script, I'll gladly do it. I can't possibly do worse than David Goyer. The Crow is both the most beautiful and tragic film series I've ever drawn. I hope you enjoy these sketches. Patreon.com/DestinyComics